This video was brought to you by Brilliant. Since Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, Turkey has pursued a delicate balancing act, trying to present itself as pro-Ukraine, but not overtly anti-Russia. This strategy has proved remarkably successful in lots of ways, and Turkey has emerged as a key mediator in the conflict. However, last week this tone suddenly changed, and the Turkish government came out in support of Ukraine restoring its pre-2014 borders, joining NATO, and even offered a post-war security guarantee. So in this video, we're going to take a look at how Turkey's Ukraine posture has changed, and what might have motivated this sudden shift. Never miss an episode and always feel in the loop by subscribing and ringing the bell. So let's start with a bit of context and explain how Turkey has positioned itself throughout the Ukraine war. True to form, Turkish President Recep Erdogan has tried to play both sides, and, well, he's sort of succeeded. For starters, Turkey has enjoyed a series of diplomatic wins since the invasion. Erdogan has pretty good relations with Putin, despite Turkey being a NATO member, and Turkey hosted the first round of negotiations between Ukraine and Russia in March 2022. While these negotiations promptly collapsed, Erdogan then played a key role in negotiating the Black Sea grain deal in July 2022, which allowed Ukrainian farmers to export their grain via the Turkish Straits, with monitoring from the Turkish authorities. As well as burnishing Turkey's diplomatic credentials, Erdogan's ambivalence also has helped the Turkish economy. Turkey's economy looked pretty vulnerable when the war began. Thanks to Erdogan's unorthodox monetary policy, inflation was already running at about 50% year-on-year in January 2022, and the sanctions-induced rise in global energy prices threatened to make everything a whole lot worse. However, Turkey weathered the storm pretty well. Turkey refused to join with most sanctions, which meant that they were able to both import Russian energy and act as a transit hub for Russian oil and gas. Lots of Russian cash also flowed into Turkey to avoid sanctions, which provided Turkey with a much-needed source of foreign currency, while Turkish defense companies made serious money selling drones and infantry carriers to Ukraine. In 2023, Turkey refused to immediately let Sweden and Finland into NATO, which both pleased the Kremlin and allowed Turkey to extract various concessions from other NATO members. Then, just last year, Turkey again stepped in as a mediator to negotiate a prisoner swap, which included American journalist Evan Gershkovich. You get the idea then. Turkey has played both sides, continuing to trade with both Russia and Ukraine, while using its unique position as a relatively Russia-friendly NATO member to position itself as a much-needed mediator. However, in the past couple of weeks, Turkey has started sounding conspicuously pro-Ukraine. This really began on Tuesday last week, when, just a few hours after Russian and American officials met in Saudi Arabia, Zelensky paid a surprise visit to Ankara. At the joint press conference afterwards, Erdogan insisted that Ukraine and Europe should be included in the negotiations, reaffirmed his support for Ukraine's territorial integrity as, quote, non-negotiable, essentially implying that he expected Ukraine to retake all of its pre-2014 territory, including Crimea, and even came out in support of Ukraine's NATO membership. This all directly contradicted the Trump administration, who had pursued negotiations without Ukraine or Europe, suggested that Ukraine will have to accept some territorial losses, and dismissed Ukraine's NATO aspirations as unrealistic. This was followed by similar comments from the Turkish foreign minister, who this week reaffirmed Turkey's support for Ukrainian NATO membership, suggested that Turkey could act as a security guarantor in the event of a ceasefire, and encourage Europe to pivot away from the US, arguing that reducing dependency on the US will make them more resilient. Now, it's important not to overstate all of this. Turkey has always supported Ukraine's territorial integrity, and Erdogan has a bit of a habit of flip-flopping on foreign policy. Nonetheless, it's at least true that Turkey sounds a lot more pro-Ukraine all of a sudden. And, well, this is good news for Zelensky. So, what's motivated this shift? Well, as we see it, there are at least 4 possible reasons. Firstly, Erdogan has made it clear that he still wants to mediate, and is probably trying to keep Ukraine on side by convincing Kyiv that they won't force an unfavourable deal on them like the one that Trump is apparently trying to negotiate with Russia. Second, it's part of a wider turn in international opinion against Russia and the US. This became glaringly apparent in Monday's UN General Assembly vote, where just a handful of countries voted with the US and Russia against the European resolution calling for an end to the war in Ukraine. This is essentially because, while the war looked a bit like a NATO-Russia proxy war before, which meant that countries which weren't super keen on the West were reluctant to throw their weight behind Ukraine, now Trump and Russia are apparently on the same side. It looks more like plain old neo-imperialism, the big countries bullying the small countries. Erdogan has long advocated for a multipolar world, rather than one dominated by the traditional superpowers, so it's not surprising that he's resisting Trump here. Third, Turkey wants Russia out of the Black Sea, which is why Erdogan is so keen on Ukraine recovering all of its pre-2014 territory, including Crimea. But fourth, Turkey wants to leverage its military power to get something out of the EU. For context, Turkey is one of the largest armies in NATO, with more active troops than any European army. Erdogan has noticed that Europe needs a military power to guarantee Ukraine's security without American support, and he's offering to help if the EU gives him something in return, like letting Turkey join the EU. Erdogan actually made this explicit on Monday, when he claimed that Turkey's accession into the EU is the only way to solve the continent's security and demographic crises. This isn't the first time that Erdogan has tried to play this either. Literally hours after Trump won the US election in November, Erdogan told reporters at the European political community that, quote, Turkey's full inclusion in the European Union defense efforts is indispensable for Europe's peace and security. Now, while it's hard to imagine Turkey actually joining the EU anytime soon, Erdogan might still be able to negotiate something like a closer economic relationship with Europe, or at least get the Europeans to turn a blind eye to his ongoing crackdown on opposition politicians. This also creates a bit of a dilemma for Europe. If Europe does actually decide to build a new security architecture outside of NATO, and we're saying Europe, not the EU here, because it will probably include the UK too, would this include Turkey? On one hand, Turkey has a strong army, a thriving defense industry, and sits at a strategically valuable position along the Black Sea and at the confluence of Europe and the Middle East. On the other hand, Erdogan has proven a somewhat unreliable and occasionally two-faced NATO ally, and certain European countries, most notably France and Greece, could be very resistant to the idea. Now, the thing is, often in politics, we need to understand a wide variety of topics to truly grasp what's going on. And fortunately, our sponsor this week, Brilliant, can help us do just that, with thousands of lessons in maths, science, programming, and AI. And not only that, their interactive lessons teach you by doing, instead of just asking you to mindlessly memorize stuff. In turn, this helps to build your critical thinking skills and become a better thinker. For instance, Brilliant's newly updated maths courses help you to establish a strong foundation in algebra. It then helps you to build on this, teaching you how to conquer calculus, all while maintaining an emphasis on problem solving and reasoning. The thing I like most about this, though, is that their mathematical courses help you to develop your mathematical intuition and fluency, skills that you can use in the real world. As we've told you before, data skills are absolutely necessary for navigating the modern world, and Brilliant is the best way to get them. To try everything that Brilliant has to offer for a full 30 days, visit brilliant.org/TLDR, or click the link in the description. And by doing so, you'll get 20% off an annual premium subscription.